Good afternoon. My name is Todd Sanders. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Chamber. We appreciate you joining us for the Greater Phoenix Chamber Foundation's webinar series, Reimagining Today's Workforce. Today, we are excited to hear from two industry leaders as they share their strategies on how to source top talent. I'd like to begin by thanking our Workforce Series sponsor who continue to demonstrate their commitment to our chamber, but also to our community. So a virtual round of applause for APS, Maricopa Community Colleges, which are our gold sponsors. Our silver sponsors are ADP and Northern Arizona University. Our bronze sponsors, Southwest Gas. Thank you all for your support. It's most appreciated. So now to kick off today's program, I am pleased to introduce Catherine Perez, who is the Workforce Manager for the Greater Phoenix Chamber Foundation, who's going to share a brief update on some of the Chamber's current initiatives. So Catherine, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd. And hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us. Give me a few minutes to grab my presentation and share it with you all. Perfect. Is everyone seeing my presentation? Beautiful. I'll get started.
Good to go.
Perfect. So on our workforce front, we're continuing to bring industry together to identify talent needs and strategize on ways to enhance the talent pipeline through our 6 workforce collaboratives. We're always looking for employers to join and provide their insight and perspectives. We'd love to get connected and share more on the amazing work these collaboratives are doing and for all of you to participate. And then on our educational side, through Elevate Ed AZ, we're engaging with high schools to better align their classes and programs with the industry needs. We have recently onboarded a new platform called Community Share that helps connect employers with teachers who are looking to engage industry in the classroom. This is a great way to get in front of students, talk about career opportunities, and provide internship to students. We invite all to register for the Community Share through the link above today. And last, but of course not least, employee health and wellness is also a key element in training your employees. Wellness A to Z has many ways and many resources to support your team. To highlight just a few, we encourage you to consider taking the Healthy AZ Pledge. Check out our Work Well webinars, which address topics such as mental health, work from home, adaptability in the workplace, and most recently, COVID-19 vaccines in the workplace. We also host Play Well webinars where you and your staff can learn ways to stay active while working from home, in the office, outdoors, or in the field. Save the date for Wellness A to Z Day, which is on May 18th. This year, you can encourage your employees and their families to celebrate health and wellness by participating in Wellness A to Z Day activities, which will be listed on our website and sent out to Wellness A to Z employers. Check out our website and follow us on social media to keep up to date at Go Wellness A to Z. And with that, let's jump into today's program. Today, we want to spend some time learning how various employers are applying different approaches to source top talent. We're excited for today's guests to share their experiences and advice on how you can find the right candidate in today's competitive environment. With that, I'm happy to introduce today's panelists. Kathleen Duffy, President and CEO of Duffy Group, Inc., and Danielle Lee, Lead Account Manager for Collabra. Before Todd dives into some panel questions, I'd like to have each of you take a brief moment to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your current role. Kathleen, let's start with you, please, followed by Danielle. Welcome, Kathleen.
Great, thanks, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello, everyone. I am Kathleen Duffy, and I'm the President and CEO of Duffy Group. I'm the founder of the organization, too. A lot of people ask how I got started, my business got started, and it actually goes back to my ASU days. I was in a variety of different student activities. I was in Greek life, I was a devil's advocate, and it was always recruiting people to my sorority or to Greek life or to the university. And so I guess that's really where my passion for recruiting became a passion. And I didn't realize that it was a career that I could take. And so I ended up bumbling around for a few years, but I worked for a boutique retained search firm here in the Valley for 8 years. And in every single retained search firm, they have what's called recruitment research. And that's what I did. And recruitment research is the front end of all the search processes where we are proactively going out there and targeting candidates who are currently employed that our client wants to hire. So in the late 90s, I found myself where my employer was relocating to the Bay Area and I was out of work. And so I decided to start a business. But instead of selling my recruitment research expertise to other traditional search firms, I chose to sell it to corporate America. And that's how Duffy Group was born, is I was introducing the concept of unbundling the search process to corporate America, where they could buy the pieces that they need and be able to execute on the search that way. And so here we are 30 years later, and companies are embracing this alternative model out there, but they still don't really know about recruitment research. And so that has been my strategic goal, my strategic initiative, is to help elevate the awareness of the recruitment research model. And I've actually just written a book about it called Revolutionizing Recruitment, which will be out in June.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for that. And obviously, we know you, the Chamber, also is one of our Athenas, and so really appreciate having you here with us today. We're also very, very excited to have Danielle. Danielle, you want to talk to us a little bit about yourself and how you got here?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this panel, something that is very important to me across my career. So my path has been a little bit different. I am first generation Filipino American, first person in my family to graduate college, and started my career in the South. So we lived in the Panhandle for about 10 years, where I started my career in IT staffing and solutions with one of the largest companies in the industry. I recruited, I was an account manager, and I'm currently now with Collabra leading a team of account managers in Phoenix. And staffing and recruiting was never something that I thought was going to be a career path for me when I was in college. I double majored in psychology and sociology and always thought I'd go through a master's program or something. And I graduated in 2009, and many of you probably remember 2008, the housing bubble burst. It wasn't a great time to find employment, which, I think of my situation back then and I compare it to what kids are going through now that are going out of college or transitioning their roles or trying to figure out their next career path. And I am grateful for where I was 12 years ago versus now, because it is a tough market right now. And so just had a lot of experience within the recruiting, account management, mostly on the technology end. The technology industry is growing, and even with COVID, has not taken that much of a hit in unemployment. Unemployment rates right now in technology are about 1.9%. There's still more positions out there than there are qualified candidates. And so that's something, just being hyper aware of that in my industry, trying to partner with companies and how to best attract and retain that talent, because it's a competitive market and it's spreading across every industry if you want to gain top talent. So I love conversations like this where we can really hone in on what companies can do to set themselves apart, because that's going to make a whole difference in the talent pool that you have within your organization, and that's going to affect your deliverables. It's going to affect how you perform. And so I love a lot of the questions that we already have prepared for this conversation. And the reason why I did bring up that I was first generation Filipino is because I think a lot of the diversity piece is going to be a big part of our conversation later.
Well, Daniel, thank you for joining us. And I love the sort of the path you took into this career. Fascinating and really great to hear a little bit about your background. So thank you for that. And you talked a little bit about, how do you position companies? And so I'd like to maybe start there with both of you. And let's treat this as a conversation. Maybe the three of us are having coffee. I think it'll be a lot more interactive. So please feel free to go back and forth. And if you have points you'd like to make, let's go ahead and do that. But, talk to us, this obviously goes to both of you, about how do you sell your client, or how do you brand companies when you're being approached for a job opportunity? What sets companies apart, since it's such a competitive marketplace? And feel free, either one of you, to jump in on that one.
Go
Um,
ahead and start. Sorry, Danielle.
oh no, you're good.
Okay, so so with as I talked about the recruitment research approach, which is it's really a 5-step methodology, and it starts with strategy development, then it's name generation. We promote the position, we evaluate the candidates, and then we present a report to our clients. And again, it really, for positioning or, helping to sell the company, to help selling up the clients that we have, it really is about that strategy development. And that is the very, very beginning part of the process, where you meet with the client, the hiring leaders, any of those key stakeholders, to really understand what the story is. And it's all about storytelling. It's about the sizzle, because, to Danielle, your point, there are more IT jobs out there than there are IT candidates. And so, what's the story that's going to get one, that very rare candidate to pique their interest and be interested and raise their hand and have an opportunity. And that's our job, right, Danielle, is to really be able to tell that story and to get them interested in the opportunity.
Thank you. Danielle, anything you wanted to add to that as well?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with everything Kathleen said. And it's a lot of it is branding and transparency. I think a lot now with technology, and you can go on what is Glassdoor. You can go on Glassdoor, look at a company and get feedback. And so it's so important for companies to realize what their brand is to their customers as well as to their employees. And now, as generations shift, employees want to be tied into the purpose of that company, which I love what Kathleen said about we have to tell the story. And you have to find the right employee that connects with that story or that purpose of that company. And we're finding more and more now that it's not just pay, it's not just salary. A lot of it is culture and purpose of the company that drives employees to either be attracted or to stay with their company. And so I think a big thing for companies, if they want to keep and attract their top talent, they have to realize it's a balance of pay, which is going to be important because all that stuff you can look up online. Benefits is becoming more and more relevant as healthcare is a need, and especially with COVID, I think that highlighted the need of healthcare and good healthcare within companies and affordable healthcare. And then culture. I think you can have good pay, you can have good benefits, but if you have a horrible culture, social media is going to ruin you. Glassdoor is you're gonna have that reputation in the market as being a horrible company to work for. And then tying to your purpose as well, and finding people that want to work for your purpose. And that's where it becomes a numbers game, and finding that right person for your team. Because there are going to be some, and more on the technology end, there's going to be people that just want to be in technology. And there's going to be some people that want to work for a purpose, whether it be a healthcare company or an energy company or the state and local government to push forward whatever initiative. And so those are other things that you want to think about when you're going through that interview process with someone. Are they tied to my purpose as well? Because that's what's going to hold them there and make them more passionate and ultimately work harder for the company.
Absolutely. I have some more questions. I do want to. Pardon?
If I could just add something to that,
Sure.
Todd. One of the, for the people that are attending this, a really great question to ask your hiring leaders is if you are, so Todd, what I would say to you is, so Todd, you're talking to your ideal candidate over coffee today, and how are you describing the chamber? Talk to me about the culture at the chamber. Talk to me about your leadership style. So you really want to, ask that question. What would you be telling a candidate if you were sitting across the table from them? And it's a great way to get that story and to be able to articulate it to these candidates.
Well, and I think for the leaders to also think about that themselves, because that's such an important thing in the market, as I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
And before I move on, I do want to remind the audience or let you know that we'd love to hear your questions too. So if you want to use the chat box, the Q&A box, please send us those questions and we'll get through as many as possible. But I do want to kind of key into the last topic we just had. And one of the things that we hear, we have a service at the chamber where, we'll help companies as they're recruiting inbound. And one of the challenges that we hear is people are sold on the company. It's the culture or the purpose, but they're not necessarily sold on Phoenix. Now, when they get here, it's a different story. They find out it's not a cactus and coyotes and all of that stuff, right? But how do you deal with that with candidates that you're, for instance, bringing inbound into Arizona that have those concerns? And maybe I'll start with you this time, Danielle.
Yeah, so that's a big question, right? How do you get people to relocate to the town that they need to be in? And now with technology, that's shifting a little bit, where many companies are allowing remote work. So that's opening possibilities for where people can live and work. But there are still a lot of companies that are requiring their employees to sit on site or within the state. And so that's a big thing that companies have to engage with organizations like the chamber, because that's the only way we're going to be able to give that feedback and say, hey, this is what this demographic wants. Luckily, Phoenix, it's a major city. Schools are generally good here. I came from the panhandle of Florida. So if you can imagine how hard it is, like my biggest selling point for Florida was no state taxes. But I grew up in Virginia where they had many state taxes. So we were constantly trying to pull talent from bigger cities like your Northern Virginias, your Chicagos, your Atlantas, where we can say, hey, there's no state tax, cost of living here is great. And so you highlight what you can, or you highlight and this is where it's important, you can't automate recruiting because it's tied to what's directly important to the person you're talking to. So if they have a family and they have kids, then you can say, you can look at areas in the West Valley or the East Valley, and I'm still getting used to this. I just moved here in November, so sorry if I'm incorrect about any areas, but there are areas and pockets where schools are great and great family areas. We're building a house in a community that is large community that's centered around parks and a school. And so, and I have a 2.5-year-old, and I have another one on the way in September. And so things like that are important to me. And so you have to figure out what's important to that person to highlight what's great about this town and what it can provide them. And so a lot of times for us, if you're looking at candidates on the West Coast, your Californias, your Oregons, your Washingtons, the big driving factor to come to Phoenix is cost of living. But as everyone is seeing, the housing market here and everywhere is booming. And so that is not going to be as much of a factor in maybe the next 5 years, because I see our cost of living and our housing trending the same way that the West Coast is. And so we have to highlight it by what our government is doing, what incentives are happening here locally. If it's a family person, highlight the families. If it's a younger person, highlight nightlife and other options of lifestyle. And so for me, that's the long-winded answer to a complicated question.
It is complicated, but and obviously you've just been through this, so thank you for those thoughts. Kathleen, how about you? What do you do?
So, I think that the biggest thing that people forget when they're considering relocating candidates to Arizona is that it's not just the candidate that's making the move, it's that entire family. So there may be a trailing spouse, a trailing partner, children are in activities. And so I've been here for a long time. and so, part of what I do, just because I'm so connected into the community, is that if somebody is looking at an opportunity, let's say it's a CFO and his or her spouse is also a CFO or a head of HR or you name it, I'm able to help get them networked into the community, and also with children too. So let's say we had one client that was relocating their CEO in from, I think it was Montana or something, and their children were expert soccer players and looking at certain schools. And so we did some research for them and helped them to understand, where were the right, soccer clubs and whatnot to help them. And Because it's interesting what you hear today of how many people call the day before they're supposed to show up, and all of a sudden their spouse says, she or he does not want to move to Phoenix. And if you've not gotten them into the conversation and are recruiting them too, that's what's going to happen.
Well, it sounds like from both of you that it takes a very holistic approach. It's not just sort of looking at the person and figuring out how to make a match. It's really holistic. And I think to your point, Kathleen, if you don't do that, you might be surprised at the last moment, which I can imagine would cause some problems. Let me kind of shift gears a little bit, because both of you have said demand is higher than supply, and that's great for employees out there, people looking for careers. And so we've all struggled finding people, but when you're not seeing a good flow of candidates, when is a good time to turn to one of you to really start to step up a game? When do you know that this isn't just normal? We're not having a good luck here. We need to do something different. And I'll start with you on this one, Kathleen.
Sure. So when I'm talking with potential clients about, what's going on internally, usually the reason that they need to have some extra assistance is that we call it the post and pray method, right? Right, Danielle, where that's, they post the job and they just pray that somebody, the right candidate's going to show up. So they're just not seeing the right qualified candidates. With COVID, with so many things, everybody's bandwidth is just, you have to wear more hats than you ever had to do. And recruiting is really time consuming, especially if you are looking for a really difficult position to fill. We work predominantly in niche roles. So it really is an issue of bandwidth. Budgets have been slashed. And they just many clients don't have the financial resources that they once had to pay for, a high fee or fees that are based on a percentage of the candidate's salary. With recruitment research, it works in billable time. And so it allows the client to buy the services that they need and to really manage that recruiting budget. And again, there, and then again, the not really knowing who else is out there. So again, with the recruitment research model, we are tasked to go out. Again, we talked about that intake call and putting that strategy together. So we're tasked to go out into their competitors or into specific industries and target the candidates who are currently employed in the positions that they want to recruit. And so our recruitment research model provides market data. So sometimes it lets you know why you're not finding the right candidates. And it helps them to make that, that decision, or to be able to tell the board of directors or whomever the stakeholders are that are saying, but there have to be a ton of Todd Sanders out there. And there's only one of you, Todd.
Yeah, well, thank God. But I love what you just said, post and pray. We do that. Okay, that is a perfect way to visualize that. And the other thing I think about when you talk about, we have these unicorns that we look for, and that's really hard when you're posting and praying to find that unicorn. So I think there are some really interesting ways of looking at this. So thank you. Danielle, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I laughed when Kathleen said post and pray, because I would say get engaged with a partner early on. And the only reason why I say that is because they can give you a strategy. For the companies that I've always worked for, we don't work on retainer, we always work on deliverables. So if we deliver someone, you don't pay us until we actually deliver and you hire. And same billable hours, and depending on what option or solution you're looking for. But this is where I said earlier, you can't automate certain parts of recruiting. And what a lot of companies do is they think they're going to use some recruiting app and they're going to get top candidates. That's not how that works. People that put in their applications, most of the time, I'll say probably 75-80% of the time, are people that are unemployed, sometimes for a reason, sometimes not for a reason. Maybe they're, maybe sometimes we'll get that purple unicorn, like you said, that actually does, is looking to move to the area, that has the experience that you're looking for, and decides to apply. That doesn't happen very often. And so you're spending your money on these recruiting apps, and you're wasting more time vetting through the candidates that are getting sent over to you than actually effectively recruiting someone. And to me, time is money. So if someone on your team is tasked to do that, where they could be doing something else that's more productive, that's time and money. And so when you're reaching out to a recruiting partner, to a staffing partner, our expertise is, like what Kathleen says, we're reaching out to that top 20, 30% of employees that are employed. When you want to employ a candidate that is going to be more effective, we tend to go after people that are already employed because they have the job tenure and experience. And so it's more important to go after people that are currently working and understanding their situation, because everyone's situations may be different. They may be happy or unhappy in their job. They may be looking for better benefits or more money or a different location. And that's where, when you're proactively recruiting, you're getting that information and then putting them with the right client to ensure better success. And so my answer to that question, get engaged early on. We can help you build a strategy. And there might be a couple options as well. A lot of the times companies are so tunnel visioned in what they need that they don't consider or give people an opportunity to grow and flourish in that role, whether it be a degree or a certain specific experience, where you could get someone that is out of your box a little bit and they can come into your company and just completely take off. But if you don't give someone that chance, then it makes it a little bit more difficult to find that person, especially if you're looking for a really niche skill set or personality. And that's something you're not really going to fully understand in just an interview process. That takes 1, 2, 3 months of employment before you can really figure that out. And so we also do have a process called contract to hire, where you can contract someone out, see if they work for that time period, and then if they're really the good fit for your company, then you can hire them internally. It gives you, the company, a little bit more security in knowing that if I do hire someone, I'm not necessarily going to be stuck with that person if they don't perform, or if I have to figure out how to then performance manage them out. Because HR, and I worked for an HR company for a little bit, it's especially during times of like COVID, where people do go through some more trying times, you'll find that as unemployment goes up or as issues go up, legal action also goes up. And so, there's that risk factor to the company as well that you want to think about.
So some risk mitigation that's included in there. But I think what I heard too is that really the opportunity cost. By deciding you want to shave all those dollars, you end up spending more in the long run and probably taxing your other folks. So that doesn't get you really anything besides probably some heartburn in that meantime. Well, let me kind of, along with that, and you all mentioned sort of online apps. What's your preferred tool for recruiting? Is it online? Is it sort of in person? I know that I get things pretty regularly from recruiters saying they're looking for this person and maybe I can refer somebody. What's the best way to go about doing that? I mean, I'll start with you, Danielle.
We've seen a lot of success with LinkedIn. I personally have not put in an application to any company since I was in college because I've been recruited off of LinkedIn by a recruiter. And so I've seen a lot of success personally, as well as a company. We do use Recruiter LinkedIn, especially for those higher level specific positions. So if anyone is looking for a job, I do highly recommend creating a LinkedIn if you are looking for your next opportunity, because it's a great way for recruiters to have visibility into your experience. And then referrals. I don't like the post and pray method. It typically ends up being more not a great use of time. And so referrals, if someone will refer someone, typically they've either had an experience or heard of an experience with that person. And so the success rate, I believe, is around like 40 to 48% higher in that person getting an interviewing and starting within a role. So LinkedIn and referrals are our two biggest.
Excellent. Thank you. Kathleen?
Yeah, I think that LinkedIn is definitely a tool that everyone uses. But when I got started way back in the Stone Ages, we we weren't even using computers at the time. And so really the foundation of my company and really recruitment research in general is the phone and picking up the phone, because again, when we are working in billable time, so our clients pay us by the hour, we have to be very, very targeted and focused. So if Todd, you're looking for a key executive at the chamber, you want to make sure that we're targeting other chambers of similar size for your fill in the blank position. And in order to do that, it's about doing the research, identifying who those people are that are in the job, and contacting them directly. Now, sometimes you can do initial outreach to them through LinkedIn, but sometimes at very senior levels, they're not active on LinkedIn. And so, we do have to go back to the tried and true method of picking up the phone and talking with people. And now that people are working remotely, it's much easier to connect with them, and they feel a little safer to have a quick conversation, knowing that, they can just at least find out some information and then reschedule it for when they're off hours. But that's typically how we do it. But I do think also referrals are a great way, but and employee referrals is really where everybody should start.
So I think to your point, you got the basics are going to be important. You can have the internet, but doing the old-fashioned sort of making calls and reaching out and talking to networks is really going to be important in this process from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I think Danielle hit it on the head too. We can't automate all of this, right? I mean, there's that human factor, that high touch. Recruiting is a high touch business, and while there are some amazing tools out there, like with artificial intelligence, those are really great for a lot of those blue collar jobs. But when you're dealing with professional level roles like Danielle's organization is and ours, you can't do that. And so you've got to remember that you've got to be loving on these people, because there's so much competition for this talent that you've just got to, it's really about that candidate experience. And that's the other piece that we can't forget.
Well, so I'm hearing from you that intentionality is really key. And I think Danielle also mentioned diversity. We're very focused on that at the chamber. So Kathleen, how do you ensure that when you're bringing a pool of folks to a company that you're really focused on diversity and inclusion?
Sure. Well, and I think that the whole Black Lives Matters movement has really highlighted all of that. But I'm very involved in women on boards and making sure that women are represented on corporate boards. And so it really is all about, making sure that your executive team looks like the population that it's servicing, right? So we do it, again, it gets back to the intake, it gets back to the strategy. So we have some clients that are faith-based organizations. And so the diversity for them is their faith, and they need to be from a certain faith. We have some that are, require Hispanic bilingual. And so again, then those are the places that you target. We've worked with some LGBTQ organizations, and so we want to go into that space. We had a situation a few years ago where we were working with a university in the Northeast, and they were looking at bringing on more development talent. And they found that their development talent did not look like their alumni population. And so they wanted to try the recruitment research model so that they could go after diverse candidates exclusively. And so the strategy was to go to the historically Black colleges and universities to target those individuals and see if they would consider opportunities in the Northeast. So again, it can be very strategic like that. But the other piece of it is that there are all sorts of network, the Black MBA, the Hispanic MBA, the women, you name it there. And I think that people need to start really, companies need to really begin engaging with that. Because again, it's about curating the pipeline. So we may not have enough diverse candidates that are ready to fill the roles that we have. We talk about this with women on boards. There may not be enough women that can fill some of these boards. So we need to start getting that pipeline curated so that, the relationships are being built, and when the time is right, then you have that pipeline of talent to be able to bring in.
Thank you. Danielle?
Yeah, I think that's a great and an important question, especially in our current times. I think it all starts from educating not just the talent pool, but also educating your hiring managers and your company itself. I think when we're talking about diversity, and now with social media and just how everything has played out the last couple of years, I think it's not just talking about one or two groups that haven't been represented, but all of the groups that haven't been represented. And so that even goes to, and something that I'm finding more and more of my clients be interested in is the neurodiverse community. So, it's all about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And before we can have that, the people that are making the decisions also need to be trained on their own biases, or else it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be a topic of conversation, but change is not going to happen. This type of change has to happen at the top, and it has to be educated through the levels of the people that are making these hiring decisions. A lot of the times, in working with clients for the past couple of years, you'll see, the makeup of a company, and you'll say, okay, well, why are you not considering these types of candidates? Or where's the disconnect? Or where's the gap? Is it the language barrier? And if it is a language barrier, what was that language barrier? And then, like Kathleen, if you have more clients that have more specifications, like the religious background or whatnot, that makes it a little bit tougher to really encourage diversity within that. But for the companies that can and are embracing it, this is where you can talk about it all day, but until you hit it on the top level and educate all the layers that are actually making these hiring decisions, your change within your company is not going to happen. And something that Collabra does actually really well is we have a JUMP program, which is a specialized or a customizable program to where we upskill and reskill your employees. So a lot of times, especially with technology, you're looking at a very niche or harder skill set within technology, say a Java developer or .NET developer, where they're looking for, like what Kathleen said, curating the talent pool. And so we'll actually take students straight out of college with maybe very little experience, run them through a 12-week program or an 8-week program. And after that program, they should be qualified enough for the company at the end of that to have a pool of people that they can pull from depending on how they did throughout that program. And so again, that risk, the mitigating the risk of hiring people that maybe have not exemplified the experience of what exactly you're looking for. So we have to create that talent pool. But something that I do want to touch on a little bit more is the whole neurodiversity piece. It's something that's a little bit newer, where in talking to many managers, they have children in that middle to high school range or in college, and they're saying, hey, my kids may be a part of that spectrum. And what am I doing for the industry to encourage and foster an environment that is welcoming to my children, because one day they're going to be in the workforce. So that's something that we're really looking at, especially in the next 5 to 10 years, as we're seeing the changing of generations, right? And there's generational gaps now, but that's something that all has to start from that bias training. You can talk about diversity inclusion all day long, but if you're not going to implement a bias training to where you're recognizing I am implicitly biased to these things, whether it be education or experience or, race, religion, whatever it may be, parents, whatever you have predetermined in your head, if you're not having your team look inside what their biases are, the way you hire will always follow.
It sounds like employers have a lot of work to do sort of prior to make sure that they're in a good place to know where they want to go and who to hire.
Yeah, I think bias training is really important because we can talk about hiring diversely, being a diverse hiring community, but if you don't talk to your hiring managers about why are we not considering certain people, then it's never going to move the ball forward. It's just going to always stay within that lane where we're talking about it, but we're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We discussed this at our board meeting yesterday. So thank you for that. We have a question from the audience, and I'll go to you, Kathleen. And the question is delivering real-time market data to clients something that would help with some of these recruiting issues?
Yeah, I think that what we find is that a lot of clients just don't understand what the landscape looks like out there. They don't know who their competitors are, believe it or not. They don't know who the players are, but most of all, they don't know what their competitors are paying. And so we've had clients that are moving into a new market. We had a client that was moving into the Denver marketplace and really did not know the landscape. And so the market data that comes out of the recruitment research model helped them to understand, what's the right way to even title this position. And more importantly, what do I have to pay them? I mean, Danielle talked about pay and benefits and whatnot earlier. It's really important that you are competitive on that. And that's where the market data comes in and helps them to understand. I also think that it helps them too a little bit on the diversity side. We had a client a number of years ago that was in a traditionally male-dominated space, and the board was really pressuring them to bring a woman into their executive team. And we did, I think there was like 50 companies that we could target across the United States. And in those 50 companies, only 6 had women. And so that allowed, that showed the board that this is why we're having a hard time finding a woman candidate for it. And then, you talk to those 6 women, and then it got into the relocation issue, right? But that's really where the market data comes in and is really beneficial for hiring leaders.
Sure, situational awareness and kind of context for what you're getting into. Danielle, any additional thoughts on sort of real-time data?
I think that's very important, and educating your client. I think them understanding, and like Kathleen said, most of the time your client doesn't know who they're competing against. And I think it's very important to understand if you are losing candidates or if you're losing employees to other employers, why? Is it your benefits? Is it, and if it's your benefits, what can we do to make this better? If it's your pay, that's pretty easy, but of course that's determined by your budget. And then culture. I think if you understand the cultures of the companies around you and you understand what culture you want to create within your company, then the likeliness of you attracting and retaining talent is going to be better. But you also have to understand what you're competing against. So you may have another similar company down the street, but they do free snacks and a bar and everyone's out by 5 o'clock. They do 2 days remote, and you're going to lose people to them all the time because of the culture. Maybe they pay exactly the same as you, but they're tweaking some things to be more employee centric. And that's how you're always going to lose people, because they're going to be attracted to that. Everyone now is work-life balance. I think that the paradigm is shifting to we are where we work to we need to have a balance of who we are at home versus who we are at work, and where does that stop and end. And so, I think it has to be a mixture. You have to look at it holistically. You can't just pick one piece and say, we're going to pay people $10,000 more than the person down the street. But if the money doesn't matter, or if their pay is maybe 5,000 or 10,000 less than you, but they're paying for benefits entirely for the employee and their family, it evens out.
Well, and that response is a great segue. We have another question, and I'll just read it. Recruitment in the nonprofit organization setting, 250 employees or less, is very different from the corporate world. We don't have the resources, funds, or big teams of people to devote to these efforts. In addition, we have pay ranges and workloads that are often quote unquote less desirable. Working for the mission is a benefit, though I'm not excusing the normalized challenges of nonprofit compensation. So our audience member would like to hear from the panelists about tips for realistic scale down efforts nonprofit recruiters can use in recruiting, and not just sales pitches. So that's the question. And I mean, I'll start with you, Danielle.
That's a tough one, because when you think when you're going through personalized recruiting, you really want to understand what is that person's living situation. Do they have a family to pay for? Do they, what are their living expenses every month? And you have to be realistic with them as far as what they could get in the market versus what they need to realistically make to live. And I think that's the big challenge with nonprofits is that to find a larger candidate pool is tough because people have to make a living. And I understand with nonprofits, there's definitely challenges within pay where you're not going to be able to compete against corporate America. But you have to target a demographic that maybe doesn't quite need the pay, because that's where it's always going to get challenging, what your employees need versus what you can give them. But as far as a strategy, I would say even still get engaged with other staffing and recruiting companies, because maybe, we'll find someone, and I'm not opposed to, if I find a great candidate that's not a fit for anything that I need, but maybe a fit for another company, I'll send that resume right over, not expecting anything in return. It's all about branding and responsibility to the community. So even if you don't feel like, you obviously can't spend the money on staffing companies, but if you get engaged, like shoot me an email after this, I'd love to get engaged with you and see who we have within our network that maybe would fit some of the profiles that you're looking for.
Excellent, thank you. Kathleen?
Yeah, so we actually do a significant amount of work in the nonprofit space across the United States, and again, it goes back to that strategy. To your point, Danielle, you're not gonna try to pull a head of marketing or a head of HR out of an AvNet to come and work for a smaller nonprofit. And sometimes people say, well, I'm really tired of the corporate world, and I want to go back. I want to give back to a company. Well, I can't tell you how many times that doesn't work. The person gets in there and they realize that they don't have all the, in a nonprofit, they just don't have the same resources that you do in corporate America. So I would say to you, if you're recruiting, if you are a nonprofit recruiter, to just target other nonprofits. This is where you can really take advantage of the robust network that we have here in the Valley and start to know people, so that then as you are looking for more development professionals, or if you're looking for, program directors, whatever they are, you start to have that network, and then you can pick up the phone and start doing the networking, or you start building that network through LinkedIn. But we know the salaries are not competitive. They're competitive within the nonprofit space, but you also have to know that you have to target the same size nonprofit. Again, you're not going to try to pull somebody out of a large United Way, for example, to come and work for a smaller nonprofit. The compensation is just going to be different.
So it's really a very nuanced discussion, and sometimes you just kind of have to sort of work the networks and see what else is out there, and maybe what other organizations are doing to find candidates. It sounds like.
Well, and even just to make sure that you're starting. Again, we talk about curating the pipeline. So as an in-house recruiter for a nonprofit, it's your responsibility to go out there and start making friends with people that are in all these different spaces, so that when you do have a unique opening, the first places you're going to go is to your network.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I want to stay with you, Kathleen. One of the benefits I think of if we're going to have one of the recent year has been that it sort of changed the way we work. And with remote working becoming the norm, recruiting, it seems like it's no longer limited to local candidates. So what advice do you have for employers who want to expand their reach and look for talent pools on a regional or a national scale?
Sure. Well, it's so funny because we have been a remote company since its inception. So I like the word that I was a pioneer of the virtual workforce before it was even an entity. But I think that before people used to say to me, "How can you have people working from home and across the United States?" And they're like, "How do you know what they're doing?" And I'm like, "It's called trusting them." I trust that these people, and obviously the work product, you can tell whether they're working or not. But I do think that the pandemic has enlightened people that people can actually be productive, actually probably more productive, almost to a fault now, that they're working more than they were in the past. And I think that like, for example, I had a conversation with a nonprofit in the Northeast recently, and they're looking for a new CEO. And I thought that they were going to have this person reside in Manhattan. And the person said, "No, absolutely not. We can take this person from anywhere as long as they can hop on a plane and attend meetings." So I think that's what we're going to start seeing a little bit more of. I mean, there's obviously some jobs that are not going to be able to be remote. I think we need to just give them the opportunity. Do you prefer, working remotely? Do you want to come into the office, or do you want a little of both? And I know that's what I'm doing with my company. For those of us that work in my little tiny office here.
Well, and congratulations for being a pioneer. That you obviously saw what we've now seen, that it is possible, and people do, to a fault, probably work really hard. We found that at our organization. Danielle, let me go to you. Is this sort of the new normal, and is it good?
There's pros and cons to everything. And so I love the fact that we are now headed in a direction where if we can, there's obviously those essential workers that aren't going to have the opportunity to work from home. But if employees are able to work from home, it does give them that balance. And also for a larger company or any company, especially if they're in a market that has a higher cost of living, it is exponentially more financially beneficial to find candidates or employees that do work remote in areas of lower cost of living, because you can adjust that COLA depending on where they live. And so then it becomes a financial benefit to the company when you're looking for talent. It obviously increases your pool of candidates. It can help you save money just depending on where you're targeting people. But I think that the one positive that has come out of COVID is companies are now realizing we do have to have this work-life balance, and that people can work from home. Again, you trust. I think that's a big thing, is that companies didn't necessarily, they said they trusted their employees, but did they really trust their employees? And now they're seeing from the results that, okay, I can trust my employees to do this work not in the office. And like you said, to a fault sometimes, because now you don't have to get ready. You don't have to be stuck in an hour of traffic. You can literally wake up at 6 o'clock, jump on your computer, and you're working throughout the day. And I know for me, I will plan meetings, virtual meetings, hour after hour, not giving myself a break, where if I were in the office, I'd have to spread that out. Or if I was traveling to different locations. And so I just think we're more productive working from home typically. Of course, there are going to be some people that can't, but I think that in general, it's proven otherwise.
Absolutely. Well, we're running low on time. I'm going to ask one final question, and I'll start with you, Danielle. You both have mentioned company culture as being so incredibly important. When you're working with candidates, how do you screen candidates to match up with a particular position and culture in the company?
For me, it's asking them their purpose and their why. And I feel like if their purpose and their why matches up with the company, then it's going to be a better match. Also, that work experience or how they like to work. And me more so focused on the technology industry. that can vary. And so what we're looking for is, if it's a startup company, you want someone who has a little bit more flexibility and fluidity with how they work, because with a startup company, things can change every 2 minutes. When you're looking at a larger company that has very standardized processes, then you want someone who's comfortable in that, someone that's going to follow things to the T. And so that's why, and coming from the Panhandle, we had a very large veteran population. And so you actually had to talk to the veteran to understand, okay, with being the military being very strict and stringent, would you be able to fit within this company based upon your experience? Because sometimes that's where there's that disconnect between companies and veterans, is because when you're dealing with a veteran, they do come from such a standardized process where they don't feel that they can assimilate into something that is looser. And so you really, again, it comes to the personalization of recruiting, and you have to understand the person that you're recruiting and what they're really looking for.
Well, it sounds like the secret sauce that you both have talked about, that you really have to get in there and really get to know people and understand what their motivations are. Kathleen?
Yeah, and I think the only thing that I would add to that, Danielle, is that, again, it gets back to that intake conversation and saying to you, Todd, how would you have this conversation with that candidate? And we then share that with the candidate and then allow them to self-select out if they don't feel like it's the right environment for them.
Well, I think it's such a powerful thing for them to be able to do. Well, we're about out of time, Kathleen. I want to give you all a final opportunity. Any final words for our audience before we go and wrap up?
Well, recruiting is hard, and it's really harder today than it's ever been. I would just say that, if, give it a shot internally, try some, I hate to, push my book, but this, and it talks about some strategies from a research perspective on how you can incorporate that into your internal processes to start building those talent pools internally and being able to, fill these positions as quickly as possible with the best candidates.
Thank you. Danielle?
Yeah, this is a people business. And I think at the end of it, we have to think about people, and on both ends, from the employer and the employee standpoint. And so, if you're a company looking for top talent, you have to think about the people that you want to employ. And if you're an employee looking for an employer, you have to think about what you want and stand by that. And so, and also networking is a big thing. I think another generational gap is that my generation and younger, they don't think networking is important. It is still very, very important to your career growth. So networking and mentorship and getting involved with the community are all important things with companies that are looking for talent and people that are also looking for an employer.
Well, perfect. I really appreciate the time we spent this well, I guess it's the afternoon. I know I learned a lot, and I think our audience did too. So thank you for joining us and for giving us some of your wisdom. And I think certainly if folks want to reach out to you, we'll make that information available to the folks who are here today. I will want to thank the audience for joining us, and Colleen, thank you for the nice comment about today's program. We were really pleased that you enjoyed it. I want to remind everyone that our next Reimagining Today's Workforce will take place on May 20th from 12 to 1, and we'll discuss how office market trends are changing, and revamped workspaces and safety and productivity are changing. So we will look forward to seeing you then. Until then, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.